Once upon a time, in a quiet village nestled at the edge of Lagos State, where the air smelled like roasted corn and wet red earth after the rain, lived a woman called Kemi Adelik. She was 89 years old. Her hair, long gone from thick black coils, had turned a soft silver, always tied in a simple scarf she'd folded the same way for over 60 years. Her back was slightly hunched now, but her voice still carried that same stern rhythm it had when she was once the feared home economics teacher at the local primary school. Every morning, she sat under the Udala tree by the compound's front gate, whispering to God through trembling lips as she counted her rosary beads. Her thumb always paused on the fourth bead, a habit even she couldn't explain. But deep inside her, it was the prayer she never finished, the one for her dead daughter, her only child, gone too soon. No one in the village ever saw Kemi cry, not even at the funeral, but her silence was louder than mourning wails. She wore white for a year, then slowly returned to her usual faded Ankara wrappers, the ones she stitched herself long before her hands started shaking. Her pain was stitched into the folds of her clothes. But what broke her wasn't her daughter's death. It was what came after, the girl her husband brought into their home. Stepdaughter, they called her. Dupe, tall, sharp tongue, eyes that judged everything, and a way of walking that suggested she had already claimed ownership of everything under that roof. Even before Kemi's husband, Paradelik, could introduce her properly, Dupe had taken over the kitchen. She started small, changing the pepper brand, hiding Kemi's old mortar and pestle, complaining that Kemi's meals were tasteless, like prison food. But Kemi kept quiet. She kept quiet because Pa Delik was already slipping memory-wise. He forgot things, names, days, sometimes his own sentences. But he remembered Dupe, called her his late brother's daughter, said he owed it to family to raise her. She's the only blood left from my side, he had insisted one night when Kemi finally gathered courage to speak. Let her stay. We're old. Let peace reign. Kemi nodded. But her spirit didn't agree. The house that once smelled like fried plantains and camphor now reeked of kerosene and control. Dupe made herself the center of everything. Visitors, money, errands, even Sunday church dress codes. At first, the neighbors whispered, "That young girl is too bold. Oh, is she really a relative? Why is Mama Kemi now sitting outside so often? Looking lost?" They whispered. Then they stopped, because Dupe started smiling in public, acting sweet at the borehole, singing church hymns louder than everyone, quoting scripture in market disputes. But inside the house, she was a storm. And one Tuesday evening, the type that hangs heavy in the air with the threat of rain, something happened that would change everything. Kemi was in the backyard. She had just finished washing her underwear by hand, the same way she had since 1956. Her fingers ached, but she always felt calmer after chores. She walked back inside slowly, feet brushing the cold floor. That's when she heard it. Laughter. A woman's laughter. But not joy. Mocking. And then a slap. A slap that echoed like it had bounced off the walls of the ancestors. Kemi dropped her basin. She stood frozen, because the slap hadn't come from Pa Delik. It had come from Dupe, and it had landed on her own wrinkled cheek. Kemi stood there, eyes wide, the side of her face stinging. Tears refused to fall. She looked at Dupe. "Why?" Kemi asked quietly. Dupe rolled her eyes, arms folded. "You want to ask me why? For what? You think you can keep hiding that money Papa gave you?" Kemi blinked. "I don't know what you mean." Dupe stepped closer, voice raised. "You think I didn't see it? That brown envelope he tucked under your mattress. You sly old woman. Still trying to control everything even from your grave." Kemi gasped. "From whose grave?" Dupe smiled. Dark. Cold. "Yours." Before Kemi could say another word, the door creaked. Footsteps. Then, a voice. Familiar. Steady. "Kemi, what happened here?" It was Pa Delik. He had walked in, and he had seen the slap. Kemi's lips parted, but no words came. Dupe spun around, wide-eyed, fake tears already rising. "Papa, it's not what it looks like." But Kemi just fell to her knees, her old knees, cracking on the tile, hands trembling, eyes locked on the man she had loved for 64 years. She whispered, "Help me." And then, Pa Delik stood still. His walking stick trembled against the tiled floor. His eyes darted between the two women, the one on her knees and the one still standing with her arms crossed. The silence was heavy. Even the wall clock seemed to pause. Outside, thunder grumbled low and distant, as if the heavens themselves were listening. Kemi's voice broke the stillness. "Help me, before it's too late." Her words weren't loud, but they carried a weight no one could ignore. Her lips quivered. Her hands were pressed together in a plea, not just for her body, but for her dignity. Pa Delik stepped forward, his brows furrowed. "Kemi? Who slapped who?" Dupe rushed in. "Papa," she tripped. "I was helping her. You know she's old. I just caught her before she fell and she's confused. She thinks I hit her." Kemi turned slowly, her voice still trembling. "I was not confused the day I married you. I'm not confused today." She raised her hand on me. Pa Delik's eyes met his wife's. For a moment, something in him flickered. The man who once stood before a church full of people and vowed to protect this woman. The man who built this house, room by room, with her prayers and his hands. But then, he blinked, slowly, and the flicker dimmed. "Kemi," he said softly. "Dupe is young. She might not have meant it." Kemi gasped. Her hands fell from their pleading position. Her mouth opened, but no words came. A crack of thunder filled the silence in her place. She rose, slowly, painfully, without any help. "I see," she whispered. "So, it has come to this." Dupe lowered her eyes, but a faint smile pulled at the corner of her lips. Kemi turned and walked to her room, each step dragging pain, not just in her bones, but in her soul. She didn't eat dinner that night. She didn't pray aloud. She just sat in the corner of her room, staring at the small wooden box where she kept the last photograph of her daughter, Saad. Her baby, her heart, gone at 38, dead after childbirth. A baby girl, stillborn. Dupe had moved in 2 weeks after the funeral. That night, Kemi didn't sleep, because something deeper than betrayal was growing in her chest. Something worse than being slapped. She was being erased. The next morning, the village woke to the smell of yam porridge and the sound of sweeping. Kemi was already outside, clearing leaves from the compound. Her wrapper was tied tightly around her waist. Her scarf was firm. Her movements were slow, but sharp. She greeted neighbors with smiles. Small ones. Dupe stayed inside. By afternoon, visitors came. Mama Ronk from the Women's Guild. Pastor Elijah's wife. Even old blind Babate from across the street. They came with bowls of food, with small coins, with quiet words, because someone had seen the slap. A child. Toby, the neighbor's boy. He had been by the window chasing a lizard. He told his mother, who told the church elder's wife, who told everyone. And in the village, things spread fast, like oil on fire. But Dupe smiled through it all. She cooked. She laughed louder. She played gospel music on the radio. She even knelt beside Kemi in the living room to apologize, with her eyes wide and crocodile tears falling like beads. "Mommy, please. I was angry. I didn't mean to hurt you." Kemi looked at her. She said nothing. She simply took her walking stick and walked away. That night, rain poured, heavy, angry, loud, and while the thunder crashed, Kemi began digging. In the back of her room, beneath the loose tile only she knew how to lift, there was a plastic bag. Inside it, an old notebook, some documents, and a folded envelope. She sat down, unfolded the papers, and looked at the thing Dupe was really hunting for. It wasn't just money. It was something more. Something that could burn the lies from their walls like acid on mildew. She held it to her chest, then whispered, "Not yet." The next week passed in tension. Dupe tried to act normal. She called Kemi mommy in front of visitors, took her to the clinic for blood pressure, even helped bathe her feet one morning. But Kemi knew. She always knew when someone was pretending. She had seen it in parents who lied about their children's homework, in students who cried fake tears over missed tests. Now she saw it in her own home. Then came Sunday, church service. Everyone dressed in their finest. Dupe wore a gold lace buba and iro, head tie high like a queen. She held Pa Adelik's arm proudly. But Kemi came in white, plain, wrinkled, but white. And when the congregation stood for testimonies, she slowly rose. The church fell silent, because no one could remember the last time Mama Adelik gave a testimony. She walked forward, each step deliberate. When she reached the front, she turned, faced the crowd, faced her husband, faced her stepdaughter. Then she said, softly but clearly, I am not dead yet. The church froze. I am not mad. I am not confused. I may be old, but I still know the smell of lies. And soon, very soon, the truth will speak louder than the tongues of snakes. She paused, looked at the congregation, then whispered, pray for me. She turned and walked back to her seat. Dupe's smile faltered. Pa Adelik looked confused. But the church began to murmur, because the old woman had said something. And when an old woman speaks like that in the open, it means something is coming. The church didn't stop buzzing that entire week. What did Mama Adelik mean? What was she talking about? Why now, after all these years? Some said it was just old age. Others said it was deeper, that perhaps a secret long buried was beginning to rise. And Dupe began to feel it. Not in the open, of course. In the open, people still greeted her, still complimented her geli, still nodded when she handed out peppermints after service. But behind her back, the murmurs had begun. One evening, as she walked through the market to buy ogbono, she overheard two women whispering. Nah, she slapped Mama Kemio. For real? In front of Papa Adelik? God will judge, ah. Dupe turned sharply, eyes burning. But the women were already walking away, baskets on their heads. That night, she stormed into the house, throwing her nylon bags onto the kitchen counter. She's doing it on purpose, she muttered. This old witch. She wants to scatter everything. She barged into Kemi's room without knocking. You think you're smart, ABI? Kemi looked up from her wooden stool. She was threading a needle. Her eyes moved slowly to Dupe. I was smart long before you learned how to talk back to elders. Dupe's nostrils flared. You think you can disgrace me in this village? In front of church members? Keep talking. Just keep talking. Kemi smiled faintly, a tired, ancient smile. Disgrace comes to those who wear it like perfume. I only carry my name. Dupe stepped forward, raising her hand. But this time, she froze. Kemi hadn't flinched. She just looked straight at her and whispered, if you raise that hand again, I will show you what I used to do when I caught thieves stealing meat from my school's kitchen. Dupe hesitated, then turned and stormed out. But her steps weren't as firm as before, because she knew something was changing. A few days later, it happened. The brown envelope, gone. Kemi had kept it under her wrapper drawer, buried under old nightgowns. She checked that morning. It was no longer there. Her hands trembled. She pulled out every cloth, turned the drawer upside down. Nothing. Her legs buckled beneath her and she sat on the floor, whispering, Alua. Not yet. Not like this. A knock came. Not on the door. On her window. She turned. It was Toby, the neighbor's boy. Same one who had seen the slap. He stood outside with a small folded note in his hand. She opened the window. He passed it to her, then ran off. Kemi unfolded the note with trembling fingers. It read. She gave it to a man in a red car. I saw. He drove off quickly. No name, no signature, but enough to confirm what she feared. Dupe had taken it. And now, whatever was in that envelope could be in anyone's hands. That evening, Kemi waited. She didn't eat. She didn't sleep. She sat in the living room, lights off, rosary in hand, lips moving like waves of silent prayer. Around 10 p.m., she heard footsteps. Dupe entered. Her heels clicked against the tile. She stopped when she saw the silhouette of Kemi in the dark. "Why are you sitting here like a ghost?" Kemi didn't reply. Dupe dropped her handbag, removed her earrings. Then she sighed. "Let's stop pretending." She walked closer, sat across from Kemi. "I know you kept that envelope for years. I always wondered what was inside. But when I opened it, she chuckled. "It's not just money, Mommy. It's power." Kemi's hand gripped her rosary tighter. Dupe leaned forward. "There's a document there. Land ownership. And guess what? Papa signed it over to you, not me. Not even his blood relatives." "You," she hissed. "How convenient." Right before he started forgetting things. Kemi looked up slowly. "That land was bought after Sada's wedding. I sold my mother's gold to help him complete the payment. The documents were supposed to be in both our names. He changed it without telling me. Out of guilt." Dupe tilted her head. "So you admit it's yours?" Kemi nodded. "Yes." Dupe smiled coldly. "Well, not anymore." She stood. "But don't worry. I'll take good care of it. Maybe build a shopping complex. Name it after myself. Dupe Plaza. It sounds nice, doesn't it?" She turned to walk away, then paused. "By the way, Papa doesn't need to know. He won't understand anymore. He barely remembers what he had for lunch today." She laughed and disappeared down the hallway. Kemi sat still, eyes closed. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. The land wasn't just property. It was where her daughter was buried. In the far corner under the mango tree, with no gravestone, just a small white cloth tied around the trunk. Now, even that sacred place was slipping away. But that night, the wind changed, the power went out, and in the darkness Kemi made a decision. She rose, slowly, reached into her cupboard, opened a hidden seam inside her old church wrapper, and pulled out the original copy, the real deed, the one she had hidden before. What Dupe stole was a duplicate, a decoy. The envelope had always been bait. Kemi held the real paper to her chest and whispered, "Alua, give me strength. The lion is old, but her teeth are not gone." She packed the document in a plastic sheet, tied it in a nylon, and placed it under her pillow. Then, she did something she hadn't done in over 20 years. She picked up the small Nokia torchlight phone beside her bed, scrolled slowly, stopped at a name, Barrister Ogunjimi, her daughter's old friend. She pressed call. The phone rang, and when he answered, she said just 4 words. "It's time. Come home." Morning came with a heavy sky, the kind of sky that held its breath. Kemi was already awake, seated on the veranda, staring at the hibiscus flowers that lined the edge of the compound. She had not slept. The night had whispered many things to her, but she had made her decision. A battle was coming, and this time she would not fight it with silence. Inside, Dupe moved about like nothing had happened. She hummed a church hymn as she ironed her blouse, the same voice that once hurled insults now singing praise. But Kemi heard none of it. Her ears were attuned to something else entirely. By midday, a black Toyota Corolla pulled into the compound, dust rising from the gravel. The door opened, and out stepped a tall man in his late 40s, skin the color of polished ebony, glasses perched on his nose. Barrister Kunal Ogunjimi. Once just Kunal, Sada's best friend from secondary school. Now a respected lawyer in Lagos. He had come, as promised. Kemi rose, her knees protesting slightly, but her heart steady. Kunal stepped forward, bowing respectfully. "Mama Kemi." She smiled faintly. "Kunal." They hugged, firm and long, 2 souls bound by memories and the pain of loss. Dupe emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands with a towel. She froze when she saw him. "Who is that?" she asked sharply. Kunal turned. He gave her a long, assessing look, then simply said, "Barrister Ogunjimi." Dupe's face twitched. "Lawyer." Kemi spoke gently. "He was like a son to me, long before you were even part of this house." Dupe scoffed. "We don't need lawyers here. This is a family matter." Kunal smiled politely. Then perhaps your family should sit down and listen. He pulled out a file from his bag. It was thick. Dupe's smile faded. Inside, the living room was tense. Pa Delik sat in his armchair, blanket around his legs, sipping lukewarm pap. His eyes looked distant, confused, but not entirely lost. Kunnel opened the file. These, he said, are the original land documents for the property in question, the 5 plots behind the mango grove near the stream, registered in the year 1992. He placed a photocopy on the table. Signed by Mr. Adelik, witnessed by Mama Kemi, and countersigned by my father, late Chief Ogunjimi, the village notary at the time. Dupe's lips tightened. But I have the documents, she said. I saw them myself. They're with a buyer already. Kunnel looked at her. Calm. Cold. What you have is a photocopy. A forged one, altered with white ink and shaky signatures. Filed under a different registration number. The man who received it has already been arrested. Dupe's face drained of color. What? Your name, Kunnel continued, was never on any legal title. Not as inheritor. Not as witness. Not as blood. And most importantly, he looked at Pa Delik. Not with his consent. Dupe turned to her father. Papa, tell him you gave me those documents. Pa Delik blinked. Slowly. Confused. I don't remember. Dupe gasped. You don't? Papa, it was just last week. He looked away. Kemi's eyes watered, but she didn't cry. She placed her hand on her husband's shoulder. Softly. He did give it to you, Dupe, she said. But not the land. He gave you shelter. He gave you food. He gave you a home when you had nothing. But now, you want the grave of my daughter too. Dupe turned. Her voice cracked. What do you mean? Kemi stood, tall, firm. That land, that back corner, is where sod rests. Silence. You could hear the birds outside. Dupe's mouth opened, then shut. She's buried there? Kemi nodded. There was no money for proper burial then. Only us. So I wrapped her myself. My baby. My only one. And we buried her under the mango tree, with her name carved into the root. Dupe stepped back, trembling. Kunnel closed the file gently. This is not just a property case. It's desecration. It's fraud. And if Mama Kemi chooses to pursue it in court, you may lose more than your reputation. Dupe turned to her father. Papa, please, say something. Pa Delik looked up. His voice, barely above a whisper. I don't know who you are anymore. That was it. The sentence that broke Dupe. Her face crumpled, and for the first time she sat. Not in arrogance, but in defeat. Later that evening, Kunnel took his leave. He hugged Kemi again. I'll keep the documents safe, Ma. If she tries anything again, we'll act fast. Kemi nodded. Thank you, my son. As he got into his car, Dupe watched from the corridor. She didn't speak. She didn't move. And when the car disappeared into the distance, she walked inside, went straight to her room, and slammed the door shut. That night, Kemi sat beside her husband, rubbing his feet with warm water and balm. He looked at her with teary eyes. Did I do this to you? She smiled, weakly, sadly. You forgot. That's not the same as betrayal. He nodded, then closed his eyes. Outside, the wind began to blow again. But this time it didn't feel cold. Felt like a page turning, like something buried was finally beginning to breathe again. 3 days passed. Not a word from Dupe. She stayed locked in her room, only emerging to fetch water or eat a few spoonfuls of rice from the kitchen. Her usual chatter, her loud calls for Mommy and Papa, gone. The house was finally quiet, but Kemi knew it wasn't peace. It was the eye of a storm. So she waited, patiently. Every morning, she sat outside, plucking bitter leaf under the guava tree. Her eyes watched the gate, her ears stayed open, and her spirit remained prayerful. Then, on the 4th evening, just as the sun began to sink behind the compound wall, Dupe came out. Her face was swollen from crying, but her eyes, They still held that fire. That refusal. She walked straight to Kemi, hands behind her back. "I want to ask for forgiveness," she said, voice low. Kemi didn't reply. Dupe knelt. "I've wronged you. I know. But I need you to understand. I was desperate." Still, Kemi said nothing. Dupe continued, her voice rising slightly. "My own family didn't want me. I grew up in different houses, different hands. My mother dropped me at a cousin's place and never came back." Kemi's hands stopped moving. "I thought," Dupe went on, "that coming here, that being accepted by Papa would finally mean I belonged somewhere." She looked up, eyes pleading. "But you never loved me." Kemi blinked. Finally, she spoke. "I fed you. I bathed you. I bought you new wrappers from my market savings. I prayed over you every Sunday morning before church." Dupe's face softened. "I loved you. The only way I knew how," Kemi whispered. Silence sat between them, until Dupe whispered, "Then why did it feel like I was always in Sada's shadow?" Kemi's eyes glistened, but her voice remained calm. "Because Sad was buried, not forgotten." Dupe looked down. The evening breeze picked up, blowing leaves across the compound like whispers. Then Kemi added, "You slapped me, Dupe, and still I forgave you. But now, I ask you, will you forgive yourself?" Dupe didn't answer. She just stood slowly, turned, and walked back inside. That night, Kemi had a dream. She stood in a white room filled with mango trees. Sad was there, smiling, carrying a child in her arms. She said nothing, only reached out and pressed something into her mother's palm. When Kemi woke up, her hand was still clenched. She opened it slowly. Of course, there was nothing inside. But in her heart, she felt a strange new thing. Release. 2 weeks passed. Dupe began to change. She swept the compound every morning before the rooster crowed. She fetched water for Kemi without being asked. She even started attending women's prayer meetings again. But the village had long memories. Some women still avoided her. Others offered polite smiles that didn't reach their eyes. And Kemi? Kemi watched. She didn't fully trust yet. But she didn't chase her away either. One Saturday morning, while tying tomato stems in the garden, Dupe walked up holding a worn envelope. Kemi looked up. "What's that?" Dupe knelt beside her. "I found it in my room. It's the buyer's receipt. The one I collected when I tried to sell the land." Kemi stared at it. Dupe held it out. "I want you to burn it." Kemi took it slowly, stared at the handwriting. Her heart beat hard. Then she stood, walked to the outdoor stove, struck a match, and dropped the paper into the flame. They both watched it burn to ash. Nothing was said, but something shifted. Later that week, a knock came at the gate. It was a young girl in school uniform, eyes bright, holding a letter. "To Mama Kemi," the girl said. "From the school headmistress." Kemi opened it with trembling fingers. It was an invitation. They wanted her to come speak to the graduating class of the primary school, to share wisdom with the girls, to remind them what it meant to be strong. Tears filled her eyes. She hadn't been inside that school since she retired over 2 decades ago. And now, they wanted her back. She looked at Dupe, who had followed her out to the gate. "They want me to speak." Dupe nodded. "You should go." Kemi smiled faintly. "Come with me." Dupe's eyes widened. "Me? Yes." Dupe looked down, then nodded. "Okay." The next day they went. Kemi wore her old teaching wrapper, navy blue with yellow symbols. Dupe tied her gelly, adjusted her blouse, and held her arm like a daughter. As they walked through the school gates, children gathered. "Grandma Kemi, Mama Teacher." Their voices rose like praise songs. The teachers clapped. The headmistress bowed. Chairs were set under the mango tree, the same tree where Kemi once punished latecomers. She sat down, cleared her throat, and told her story, not just about education, but about silence, about standing tall, about forgiveness. She didn't mention Dupe by name, but her eyes drifted there often. And when the children clapped, when the drums played, when cola nuts were presented, Kemi smiled. Because for the first time in many years, she was seen again. Not as the old woman on the bench. Not as the forgotten widow, but as Kemi Adelik, daughter, mother, teacher, survivor, and somewhere in the back row, Dupe wiped a tear from her eye, because maybe, just maybe, she was starting to understand. The applause still echoed in Kemi's heart long after they returned home. That evening, as the sky blushed with the colors of sunset, she sat in the backyard peeling agbalumo for Toby and two other children who had followed her home after the school speech. They sat cross-legged, their eyes wide with wonder as she told them stories about the olden days. How palm oil was pressed by hand, how girls balanced calabashes on their heads without spilling a drop, how letters came by bicycle postmen with dust on their sandals and truth in their pouches. Dupe watched from the window. Her arms were folded, but her eyes were soft. Something in her shifted each time she saw Kemi with children. The gentleness, the patience, the way her voice danced between laughter and silence like an old lullaby. Later that night, while washing the dishes, Dupe spoke quietly. "Do you think, if things had been different, Saad and I could have been friends?" Kemi looked up from her chair. She didn't reply immediately. Then, "You both had fire, maybe too much, but fire can warm a house, or burn it down." Dupe smiled faintly. "She would have hated me, wouldn't she?" Kemi shook her head. "No, she would have pitied you, the way I do." Dupe's smile faded, but she didn't walk away, because pity wasn't rejection. It was acknowledgement, and that was still something. The next day, the church bell rang unexpectedly. Someone had died. Old Mama Funk, the vegetable seller, slipped in her bath. Heart gave out. The village gathered. It was a swift burial, as was custom. Dust to dust, cloths tied high, hymns sung with cracked voices. But at the burial, something unusual happened. As the crowd dispersed, an elder approached Kemi. Mama Alarape, the same woman who, years ago, used to gossip about how Kemi's womb only produced one child. She touched Kemi's arm gently. "We see you," she said. "You survived." Then she bowed slightly and walked away. Kemi stood there, frozen. The words repeated in her heart. "We see you. You survived." And in that moment, it wasn't just a sentence. It was a redemption, a confirmation that the years of being slapped by fate and by family had not erased her. But as often happens in life, just when the clouds begin to clear, a new storm brews. Later that week, Dupe received a phone call. She was outside, watering the hibiscus, when her phone rang. She answered. "Hello." The voice on the other end was male. Low. Familiar. "Dupe, it's me." She stiffened. "You shouldn't be calling me. You think you can walk away?" The voice sneered. "After everything I did for you?" Dupe looked toward the house, making sure Kemi wasn't near. "I told you, I'm not going through with it. I'm not selling anything. It's over." The man laughed. "You owe me, Dupe. Or have you forgotten who paid your rent in Ilupaju? Who bailed your useless brother from jail?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "That was before. I've changed." "Changed?" He spat. "You? You're still the same street rat trying to dress like a princess." Dupe's hands shook. "Don't call me again." She hung up, but her face was pale. Her past wasn't done with her yet. That night, Kemi heard her crying. Not loud sobs, just quiet, muffled weeping from the kitchen, where Dupe sat alone, hugging herself. Kemi entered silently. She stood for a moment, then walked to the kettle and poured warm water into a cup. She added a spoon of honey and passed it to Dupe. No questions, no judgment, just presence. Dupe took it, her hands trembling. "I thought I could bury my past." Kemi sat beside her. "You can't bury what you haven't faced." Dupe sniffled. "He wants money. He knows about the land. I told him I wasn't going to sell it, and now he's threatening me." Kemi looked at her sharply. "You told him about the land?" Dupe nodded, ashamed. "It was before I even moved in properly. I thought I was going to get rich. I bragged to him. I was stupid." Kemi's heart sank. She had feared this, that there was another layer, another hand in the shadows. But she kept her voice calm. "Did you sign anything?" Dupe hesitated, then shook her head. No, but he knows things. He's connected. Kemi looked at her, truly looked, and saw not a rival, but a scared girl, the kind she used to teach, the kind she used to protect. We'll handle it, Kemi said. Dupe looked up. But how? Kemi's voice was steady. First we pray, then we prepare. The next morning Kemi went to the church. Alone. She knelt at the front pew, facing the crucifix. Her lips moved in silent prayer, but her eyes were open, filled with fire. She wasn't praying just for safety. She was arming herself. She returned home and brought out a small tin box from the back of her wardrobe. Inside were receipts, letters, old photographs, everything. She laid them out on the bed like weapons. Dupe entered the room and stopped short. What's all this? Kemi looked at her. This is what we'll use. Dupe frowned. Against who? Kemi's voice dropped. Against the real enemy. Because now it wasn't just about land. It wasn't just about a slap. It was about setting fire to the lies that had lived in silence for too long. The midday sun beat down hard, but inside the house, the air was colder than harmattan. Kemi and Dupe sat side by side on the bed, papers spread before them like sacred scrolls. Kemi held up an old photograph, faded at the corners but still clear. In it, a younger version of herself stood beside a smiling man in a brown agbada, Pa Adalik's late elder brother. And right beside him, a boy, no older than 16, with sharp eyes and a lopsided grin. Dupe squinted. That's Jide. Kemi nodded slowly. Your friend, the one who called. Dupe's mouth dropped open. You know him? I remember everything, Dupe. I've just been quiet. Dupe looked away. Kemi continued, picking up a letter. This was from 2006. Your uncle asked Adelik for help. Jide had gotten into trouble. Again. But Adelik said no. Said he was tired of fixing things for him. She handed Dupe the letter. The signature was unmistakable. Dupe's voice dropped. I didn't know all that. He told me they were close. That Papa trusted him. Kemi's eyes narrowed. He lied. Dupe was silent. Then she whispered. He said if I didn't sell him the land, he'd tell everyone I forged the documents, that I stole it from Papa, that I tricked him when he was weak. Kemi's jaw tightened. Let him talk. Dupe's head jerked up. What? Kemi stood, her voice sharper than usual. Let him talk. Let him come. But this time we'll be ready. That evening, Kemi made a rare trip to the palace, the Oba's compound. The guards were surprised to see her. They offered her a seat, whispered among themselves. Within minutes, she was called into the inner chamber. There, seated in a large armchair with a beaded staff in his right hand, was Oba Rufus Alayemi II, old friend of Pa Adelik, former student of Kemi's. He smiled when he saw her. Ah, Mama Kemi, the lioness herself. What brings you here after all these years? She bowed. Kabiyesi, I need your help. And so, she told him everything. Not with dramatic flair, but with facts, documents, names, dates, the land, the fake sale, the slap, the threats, the silence that had stretched for years, cracking only now under the weight of truth. The Oba listened, nodding slowly. When she finished, he stood. Where are the documents now? Kemi handed him the originals. He examined them carefully, then looked up. You want justice? I want protection, Kemi said. Not just for me, but for the memory of my daughter, and for the girl I may not love, but who has finally started to change. Oba Rufus nodded solemnly. Leave it with me. 3 days later, Jide came to the village. He arrived in a sleek red car, windows tinted, perfume sharp like insult. He wore gold chains and designer slippers. He stopped at the house, stepping out with the confidence of a lion. Kemi was sitting outside. Dupe stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Jide smiled broadly. Ah, Mama, you're looking younger every year. You should thank me. I'm here to complete our deal. Kemi didn't blink. Dupe stepped forward. There is no deal. He turned to her, smile gone. You sure you want to do this? Because I still have the fake documents. I can go to the police. I can go to the Oba. You won't need to go far. A voice interrupted. They all turned. Oba Rufus himself was approaching, flanked by 2 chiefs and 2 men in uniform. Jide took a step back. Kabiyesi. The Oba raised a hand. You brought forged papers into my land. You threatened a widow. You tried to sell land that belongs to the dead. Jide's mouth opened, then closed. Officer, the Oba said. Do your job. Jide shouted. Wait, it was her. He pointed at Dupe. She told me the land was hers. Dupe didn't move. She didn't flinch. She just said softly, I lied, but I stopped. You didn't. The officers moved. Handcuffs clicked. And just like that, Jide was taken away. That night, the compound was quiet again. Kemi sat under the mango tree with Dupe. The same mango tree where Saad was buried. The white cloth still tied around its trunk, fluttering in the wind like a flag of peace. Dupe broke the silence. I didn't deserve your help. Kemi didn't answer. Dupe added, I almost destroyed everything. Still no reply. Finally, Kemi looked up at the stars. They say when a person betrays you, you can either curse them or change them. Dupe looked at her. Did I change? Kemi sighed. You're trying. And in that moment, that was enough. But unknown to both of them, a new problem was brewing. From the shadows of the village. From a place they hadn't looked. From someone they never suspected. Because sometimes, the deepest betrayal isn't from outsiders. It's from within the family. The morning after Jide's arrest, the village was buzzing. People gathered in small clusters under mango trees, by palm wine joints at the borehole. Mama Kemi Don finally show power. They say the Oba himself came. I heard the land is for her late daughter. And no wonder. That girl too overdue. But inside the Adelik compound things were still. Calm. Too calm. Dupe had swept the front yard. Kemi was boiling beans on the outdoor stove. The scent drifted through the air, carrying with it the feeling of something ancient, something familiar. Peace. Real peace. But only for a moment. Because while Kemi stirred her pot and Dupe rinsed clothes in the basin, a black motorcycle pulled up at the gate. It wasn't the usual Okada man. This one wore dark glasses. He didn't speak, just dropped a brown envelope on the ground and sped off. Dupe frowned. Another letter? Kemi wiped her hands and picked it up. No name, no stamp, just one sentence scribbled on the back. You think it's over? Inside the envelope was a single photograph. Grainy, old, but clear enough. Kemi held it up. It was a picture of Pa Adelik. Not recent, not young either. Somewhere in the middle, standing with another woman. Not Kemi, and a child, a girl. Dupe leaned closer, squinting. That's Papa. But who's that? Kemi said nothing. She stared at the photo for a long time, her fingers trembling. Then she whispered, That girl. She looks like... She didn't finish the sentence. Because suddenly it clicked. The earrings, the chin, the eyes. Kemi turned sharply toward the house. Where is your father? Pa Adelik was asleep in his room, snoring softly. Kemi entered slowly, photo in hand. She sat beside him, shook him gently. Wake up. He blinked. En? What is it? Kemi? Is it time for my medicine? She held the photo up. Who is this woman? He squinted. Then his face changed. His eyes dropped. His lips trembled. Kemi, I was going to tell you. She inhaled deeply. So it's true. He sat up slowly. She was... from before I met you. A woman I knew in Ibadan. I didn't think the child was mine. She left. I never heard from her again. Kemi's hands shook. But this girl looks like Dupe. He looked confused. What? Dupe, who had been standing silently at the door, stepped inside. What are you saying? Kemi turned to her. Your mother. You said she dropped you off and disappeared. Dupe nodded slowly. Yes, I never knew her name. Kemi turned back to Adelik. What was the woman's name? He looked down, then whispered, Tosin. Dupe gasped. I remember that name. Someone once called me Omo Tosin when I was small. I thought it was an insult. Kemi dropped the photo. The truth settled in the room like a heavy fog. She stared at Dupe. You are not Adelik's niece. Dupe swallowed. I'm his daughter. The words hit like thunder. Silence. Long, chilling. Even the birds outside seemed to pause. Kemi turned away. Her hands clutched her wrapper. She felt dizzy. The girl who had slapped her, insulted her, tried to steal from her, was her husband's own blood. Dupe stepped back, eyes wide, mouth trembling. You didn't know? She asked Adelik. He looked ashamed. I suspected. But when you came, you said you were my brother's daughter. I didn't want to question it. Dupe's voice cracked. You let me suffer. All these years. You left me in strangers' homes. You never looked for me? I didn't know, he shouted, then coughed violently. Kemi stood abruptly. I need air. She walked out, heart pounding. The compound spun before her eyes. Everything she thought she knew was being rewritten. She leaned against the mango tree. Tears poured down her face. How could God allow this? All this time, she had prayed against a stranger. But the enemy was not a stranger. She was family. That night, Kemi didn't speak. She didn't eat. She sat in her room, lights off, holding her rosary like a weapon. Dupe knocked once. No answer. Mommy, she whispered. I didn't know. Still silence. Dupe leaned her forehead against the door. I didn't come to destroy you, I swear. I came because I had nowhere else. I thought I was claiming what I deserved, not stealing what was never mine. Inside, Kemi listened, but she didn't move, because forgiveness is not like flipping a switch. Sometimes, it takes time. The next morning, Dupe was gone. Her room was empty, her clothes folded, her basin stacked. No note, no farewell, just gone. Kemi stood in the doorway, hands on the frame. Her mouth opened, but no words came. Only one question in her heart. Was it better this way? Days passed. No word. Then a week. Then 2. The compound felt hollow again. Pa Adelik had retreated into silence. Kemi kept to herself. But every night, she stood by the gate, staring at the road, waiting, hoping. Then one evening a soft knock came. Not at the gate, at the kitchen door. She opened it, and there she was, Dupe, but not in fine lace or gold slippers. In a plain wrapper, no earrings, eyes puffy, shoulders lowered. She knelt, without a word. Kemi stared at her, then finally spoke. Why did you come back? Dupe whispered, because I remembered whose daughter I am. Kemi didn't move. She stood at the kitchen door, hands still gripping the rusted handle, eyes locked on Dupe. The girl remained on her knees, head bowed low. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was loud, too loud. Years of pain, betrayal, confusion, and now blood. Kemi's lips finally parted. Where did you go? Dupe looked up slowly. Betagree. I stayed with Mama Beezy, the trader I used to help when I first came to Lagos. She gave me a mat in her shed. Let me wash plates for food. Kemi frowned. You suffered. Dupe nodded. I needed to. Her voice shook, but she kept going. I needed to know what it meant to lose something I never understood in the first place. Family, forgiveness, shelter. Kemi stepped forward. Dupe's eyes widened, expecting rejection. But instead, Kemi reached down. She placed her hand on Dupe's shoulder and whispered, You are my husband's child. That makes you family. And whether I like it or not, it also makes you mine. Tears spilled from Dupe's eyes. She dropped her head into Kemi's lap, sobbing uncontrollably. For the first time, her weeping wasn't out of shame. It was out of belonging. Later that night, they sat on the veranda together. No light, just the stars above and the distant sound of a generator humming in a neighbor's house. Dupe nursed a cup of pap. Kemi stirred a pot of herbs on the small coal stove, the smell of lemongrass thick in the air. Dupe broke the silence. I used to lie awake at night as a child, imagining what it would be like to have a mother, someone to comb my hair, scold me when I did wrong, hold me when I failed. Kemi didn't respond with words. She reached out and began undoing Dupe's scarf. Then, carefully, with trembling fingers, she parted her hair and slowly began to comb it. Dupe closed her eyes. A tear rolled down her cheek. No one had touched her hair since she was 7. Kemi whispered, "This is not forgiveness. Not yet. But it is the beginning of something." Dupe nodded. "That's enough for me." The next morning, Pa Delik seemed more lucid than usual. He called out, "Kemi, where's that stubborn girl? The one who burns my plantains." Kemi chuckled. "She's here." Dupe came in shyly, drying her hands with a towel. Pa Delik squinted. "Is that Tosin's daughter?" Dupe's eyes widened. "You remember?" He nodded slowly. "How could I forget? You have her forehead. That woman had a temper. May God rest her soul." Kemi turned to him. "You knew." He nodded again. "But I was ashamed. By the time you arrived, I had already promised Kemi so much peace. I didn't want to stir dust from the past." Dupe stepped closer. "Then, do you accept me now?" He reached for her hand, slowly, weakly. "I accepted you long ago. I just didn't know how to show it." She took his hand and kissed it. The moment lingered. 3 people. 1 family. Finally, uncovered. Over the next few days, something miraculous happened. People in the village noticed the change. Mama Kemi and that girl, they were walking to the market together. They saw them at the health center, Kemi translating medical terms, Dupe helping old women carry buckets of water. Whispers turned to nods. Nods turned to smiles. The same mouths that once gossiped began to greet them both. "Good morning, Mama Kemi." "Ah, Dupe. God bless you." Forgiveness, it seemed, had roots, and it was starting to grow. But one afternoon, a strange knock came. Not at the front gate, at the back door. Kemi opened it and found a small wrapped package. No name, just one sheet of paper tucked underneath. She picked it up, unfolded it, read it, and froze. Dupe walked in, drying her hands. "What's that?" Kemi didn't answer. She slowly opened the package. Inside was an old cassette tape, the kind no one used anymore, and written on the paper were 4 words. "Ask him about this." Dupe leaned closer. "What's going on?" Kemi's voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know, but I think the past isn't done with us yet." That evening, Kemi dusted off an old cassette player from the top shelf of her wardrobe. Creaked open like a coffin. She placed the tape inside, pressed play. The room filled with the sound of static. Then a voice. Adelik's voice. Younger, stronger. He was speaking in Yoruba, and his words were sharp. "We cannot tell Kemi. If she finds out, everything will scatter. Let her believe the girl is your niece. We'll raise her, get what we need, and she'll never know." The recording cut. Then laughter. Then silence. Dupe stepped back. "What was that?" Kemi's hands trembled. "That wasn't just your father." She looked at the tape again, closed her eyes. "That was a Delik, talking to someone else. But I know that voice." Dupe frowned. "Who?" Kemi opened her eyes slowly. "His best friend, Chief Salako." Dupe blinked. "The same Chief Salako that owns half the land in this village?" Kemi nodded. Suddenly, the years of confusion snapped into focus. The lies, the confusion around Dupe's origin, the obsession with the land, and that lingering feeling that Kemi had always been kept in the dark. "Dupe," she said, voice calm but cold. "We need to dig deeper, because the truth, the real truth, hadn't even started to bleed yet." The next morning arrived with a strange stillness. Even the chickens in the compound seemed quieter than usual. The sky was gray, not with rain, but with tension. Kemi sat at the table, the cassette tape lying in front of her like a curse. Her fingers ran along its edge as if hoping it would explain itself. Dupe hovered nearby, arms crossed. "You're sure it was Chief Salako?" Kemi didn't speak. She didn't need to. The voice was still ringing in her head. Let her believe the girl is your niece. We'll raise her. Get what we need. What did they need? Why hide the truth? Why deceive her for so long? The betrayal from Adelik was one thing. But if Chief Sulaco was involved, that meant the rot wasn't just inside the house. It was tied to the land itself. Later that day, Dupe returned from the market with fresh palm oil and a burning question. Do we confront him? Kemi looked up from her sewing. Not yet. Why? Kemi leaned back. Because we don't go to war without knowing the terrain. She stood, walked to her room, and returned with an old biscuit tin. Inside were yellowing receipts, photographs, a few black and white passports, and one crumpled land survey. Dupe watched as Kemi laid everything out like pieces of a puzzle. What are we looking for? Patterns. Dupe frowned. Patterns? Kemi pointed to one of the documents. Look, this survey, dated 1993, signed by the village surveyor and Chief Sulaco. She handed it to Dupe. Dupe's eyes widened. This is the same land you and Papa bought. Kemi nodded. Now see this? She picked another sheet. A deed of interest, issued 2 years later, with a different name listed. Sulaco's son. Dupe gasped. They tried to transfer the land out of your hands? Behind my back. They never expected I'd keep the originals. She sat down heavily. All this time I thought it was just greed. But now I see. It was theft. Pre-planned. Hidden behind family smiles and lies. By sunset, Kemi had made her decision. They were going to the palace. But not to the Oba. Not yet. They were going to see someone else. Mama Risi, the widow of the late village surveyor. She lived at the edge of town, where the houses gave way to the forest path. They found her outside, feeding her goats. She was old but not weak. Her eyes still sharp. Her tongue even sharper. When Kemi explained why they had come, Mama Risi's mouth twisted. Chief Sulaco? She spat. That man. May fire roast his shoes. Dupe blinked. Kemi leaned forward. So you know something? Mama Risi laughed bitterly. My husband told me before he died. Sulaco came with another man. Made him redraw the boundary lines on paper. Paid him small money. Told him it was for adjustment. Nothing serious. Dupe stepped forward. And the land became his son's. Yes, until your husband bought it honestly. But by then, they had already filed false interest documents. Only reason it didn't go through? The notary died that year. The file stayed in limbo. Kemi exhaled sharply. And now, Mama Risi reached under her stool, pulled out an old ledger. Here, my husband's journal. He wrote everything. Dates, names, even drew a small map. Kemi took the book as if it were gold, because to her it was. She stood. Thank you. Mama Risi nodded. Expose him. I've been waiting 20 years for someone to. That night, Kemi didn't sleep. She and Dupe pored over the ledger under lantern light, fingers stained with dust and memory. Everything aligned. Sulaco had tried to take the land. Adelik was part of it. And Dupe had been brought into the house not as a favor, but as a distraction. A tool. But something had changed the plan. Sada's death. Her burial on that land. And Kemi's quiet refusal to sell. That tree, the mango tree, had unknowingly protected the land. Because no one dared build over a grave. Even thieves feared the dead. The next day, Kemi returned to the Oba's palace. She handed over the journal, the receipts, the map, and the tape. The Oba read silently, listened, then looked up, his face stern. I trusted Sulaco. Kemi said nothing. He continued, this is not just deceit. It is spiritual robbery. Taking from the dead, dishonoring a grave, bringing a child into a home under false pretense. He stood, voice cold. I will summon him, and it will be public. 3 days later, a town hall meeting was called. Chairs arranged under the large village tree. The sun was hot, the people restless. Kemi and Dupe sat in the front row. Chief Sulaco arrived late. Agbada flowing, beads clinking, confident smile, until he saw them. and saw the Oba's face. Then, the color drained from his cheeks. The Oba rose, addressed the people. He laid out the truth, the forged documents, the voice recording, the boundary theft, the manipulation, gasps, murmurs, hisses. Salako tried to speak. It was a misunderstanding. Silence, the Oba thundered. This woman you tried to cheat. She raised this village's daughters. She buried her own child under the tree you tried to steal. She is more rooted in this land than your lies ever will be. He turned to the chiefs. This man is stripped of his chieftaincy title. Effective immediately. The village roared. Salako collapsed into a chair, sweating, humiliated. And Kemi? Kemi didn't cheer. She didn't smile. She just bowed her head and exhaled. Not because the war was won, but because the truth had finally stood up. The dust from the town hall meeting had not yet settled when whispers began to spread through the village. Did you hear? Chief Salako stripped of his title. Ah, it's Mama Kemi who fought him. 89 years old, but still strong like fire. Everywhere she walked, people greeted her with newfound respect. Some even bowed. Children pointed at her, whispering, "That's the woman who beat the chief." But inside Kemi's heart, there was no joy. She had carried truth like a weapon, yes, but truth also cuts the one who wields it. That evening, as the sun set behind the mango tree, she sat with Dupe. The younger woman was quiet, her eyes fixed on the ground. Finally, Dupe spoke. "Mommy, do you hate me?" Kemi turned slowly. "Why would you ask that?" Dupe's voice cracked. "Because everything you fought for, everything you exposed, it all began because of me. Because I was brought here as a lie." Kemi placed a trembling hand on her shoulder. "You are not the lie, child. The lie was what they told us. You were just caught in its web." Dupe swallowed hard. Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve your kindness." Kemi shook her head. "You don't deserve my hatred either. That belongs to the men who betrayed us both." That night, the compound was restless. Pa Delik coughed violently in his sleep. His memory came and went like a faulty lantern, sometimes bright, sometimes dark. At midnight, he woke suddenly, calling out, "Kemi! Kemi! Where is Saad?" Kemi froze. She sat on the edge of the bed, her hand clutching his. "She's gone," she whispered. "Long ago." His face twisted, as if hearing it for the first time. Tears filled his eyes. "I wanted to tell you about Tosin, about the land, about everything, but I was afraid." Kemi wiped his face gently. "You were not just afraid," she said. "You were weak, and your weakness became my suffering." He looked at her with eyes clouded by shame. "Forgive me," he whispered. Kemi closed her eyes. This was the moment she had imagined for decades, him begging for forgiveness. But instead of triumph, all she felt was exhaustion. She finally said, "I will not curse you. I will not bless you. I will only leave you to God." And with that, she rose and left him weeping in the dark. The next morning, news came that shook the village again. Chief Salako had fled. During the night, he disappeared, leaving behind his compound, his wives, and his title. Some said he ran to Lagos. Others whispered he was hiding in Cotonou. But what mattered was this: he was gone. And with him, the last shadow of deceit had lifted from Kemi's land. Yet peace did not fully return. Because while the village now saw Kemi as a heroine, inside her home, the wound remained. Pa Delik grew weaker by the day. And Dupe, though repentant, carried a heaviness she could not shake. One afternoon, Kemi found her sitting under the mango tree, staring at the white cloth tied around its trunk. "What are you thinking of?" Kemi asked softly. Dupe looked up, her face pale. "I keep wondering, if Saad were alive, would she have forgiven me? Or would she have hated me for all I've done to you?" Kemi lowered herself beside her. "Saad was fire, quick to anger, quick to laugh. She would have shouted at you, maybe even fought you." Dupe smiled faintly. "That sounds like me." "Yes," Kemi nodded. And because of that, I think she would have forgiven you. In her own way. Dupe exhaled, a shaky sound. Then maybe there is hope for me yet. That evening, Kemi prepared yam porridge with smoked fish, the dish Saad had loved most. She set 3 bowls on the table. One for herself, one for Adelique, and one for Dupe. As they ate, the silence between them was no longer heavy. It was healing. But even as the food warmed their bodies, Kemi's heart carried a quiet dread. Because she knew what the elders always said. When the truth finally comes to light, death is never far behind. And as she looked at her husband struggling to lift his spoon, she wondered if his time was almost here. The night was thick with stillness. No wind, no crickets, not even the dogs barked. Kemi sat by the window, rosary in hand, whispering the same prayer she had said for over 40 years. But this time something felt different. Inside, Pa Adelique lay on his mat, breathing slow, too slow. Dupe was asleep beside him, curled on a wooden stool, head resting against the wall. The lantern flickered, then dimmed. Kemi didn't move. She simply watched, waited, prayed, and just before dawn, he exhaled. One final breath, then silence. A silence that didn't feel peaceful, felt final. The cry rose just after sunrise. A long, aching wail that pierced through the compound. Dupe's voice, raw and trembling. "Papa! Papa, please!" Kemi came in slowly, kneeling beside her. She touched his face. Cool now, the warmth already gone. She reached for his eyes, closed them gently, then whispered, "Sleep, Adelique. The truth found you before death did." The compound quickly filled. First the neighbors, then the church women, then the youth who had grown up calling him Baba Teacher. Condolences were offered, water boiled, chairs arranged. The pastor arrived, then the local elders. But it wasn't until the Oba himself walked in, wearing his royal agbada and holding his beaded staff, that the entire village understood. This was not an ordinary burial. It was the farewell of a man whose household had lived through scandal, but whose wife had restored honor. And they came not just to mourn him, but to honor her. During the service, the pastor asked if anyone wanted to speak. Dupe stood. All eyes turned. Her wrapper was plain. Her head was uncovered. Her voice shook as she spoke. "I once came to this house full of bitterness and greed. I thought I had to take what was never given. I thought love was a thing to be stolen." She paused, looked down. "But I was wrong. I was blind. And now, the man I called father is gone. But he gave me one thing I never expected." She looked at Kemi. "A mother." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Kemi didn't move, but her eyes glistened. Dupe sat, and silence returned. Later that evening, after the body was laid to rest near the mango tree, beside the unmarked grave of Saad, the mourners dispersed. Kemi sat alone at the graveside, chewing kola nut and spitting softly into the soil. "You were not perfect, Adelique," she whispered, "but you gave me a life, a child, a name. And now, I bury you beside the one thing we both loved, even when we couldn't show it." She pressed her palm to the earth. "I forgive you." A breeze passed, lifting the edge of her wrapper. Felt like acknowledgement. That night, Dupe found Kemi sitting by the kitchen stove, staring at the flames. She sat beside her. They didn't speak for a long time. Then Kemi said, "You know what your name means, don't you?" Dupe nodded. "The one who has returned." Kemi smiled faintly. "Fitting." Dupe looked at her. "I want to stay. I want to build here. I don't know how, but I want to make this place better. Not for me, for her." She pointed toward the mango tree. Kemi's eyes softened. She would have wanted that. Dupe swallowed. "And you? Do you want me here?" Kemi didn't answer immediately. Then she reached into the pocket of her wrapper, pulled out a key, placed it in Dupe's hand. Dupe stared at it. "What's this?" Kemi's voice was low. "The back room. Sada's old room. I locked it after she died. But if you're going to stay, then it's time to open it." That night, Dupe walked to the room with shaking hands. She placed the key in the lock, turned it. The door creaked open. Dust hung in the air. A wooden bed, a folded blanket, a mirror cracked at the corner, books stacked neatly on a stool, and on the wall a faded photo. Sad, smiling, bright, full of life. Dupe stepped inside, fell to her knees, and wept, not just for the past, but for the future, because this time she would build. Not steal, not take, build. Back in her room, Kemi lay on her mat, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. She whispered softly to herself. She has returned. She smiled. Then, she closed her eyes, not to sleep, but to rest, because for the first time in decades, the house felt whole again. The rain returned that night, not the angry kind that flattens rooftops and floods gutters, but the soft, forgiving kind. The kind that taps gently on the zinc, as though asking permission to wash away old memories. Kemi lay in bed, wrapped in her favorite wrapper, the indigo one with yellow embroidery, the same one Saad gifted her after her first teaching award. It was frayed now, the fabric thinned by time, but it held her like an old friend. Outside, Dupe was folding the laundry under the awning, humming a slow hymn. She didn't know that Kemi had not moved from her bed in hours. She didn't know that the last thing Kemi did before lying down was write a letter. She didn't know that inside that letter was everything. The next morning, Dupe entered Kemi's room quietly, as she always did, carrying warm pap, smiling. "Mama, you didn't wake early today. I made your favorite." But Kemi didn't stir. Her face was peaceful, her hands folded, and beside her head, the letter. Dupe dropped the tray. "Mommy?" she called, voice trembling. She rushed forward, shaking her gently. "Mommy, please, please." But she already knew. Kemi Adelik had gone. Not with fear, not with regret, but with completion. The funeral shook the village, even more than Adelik's, because this time they weren't burying a man of status. They were burying a woman of substance. People came from outside the state. Old students, former colleagues, traders, pastors, women from church. They filled the compound, spilled into the roads. Even Mama Alarape cried. She taught us how to fight with silence and with fire. The burial was held beneath the mango tree, beside Saad, beside the orange sapling she and Dupe had planted. The pastor read her favorite psalm. The school children sang her favorite hymn. And when the first shovel of earth fell on her grave, the sky opened. Not with rain, with sunlight, golden, warm, a blessing. Later that night, after everyone had left, Dupe sat by the grave, holding the letter. She hadn't read it yet. She had waited until she was alone, until the moon was high. She unfolded it with trembling fingers. "And read, my daughter, if you're reading this, then I have finally gone to rest. Do not cry too long. I have done enough crying for both of us. You were not born from my womb, but you were born into my pain, and somehow, into my peace. Forgiveness is not a gate. It's a road, and we walked it together. Thank you for returning. Thank you for staying. Plant more trees. Feed more mouths. Teach more girls. And when the wind blows through the leaves, know that I am still here, whispering, watching, smiling. Kemi Adelik, your stubborn mother." Dupe pressed the letter to her chest, and for the first time since she'd entered that house as a stranger, she cried like a daughter. Weeks passed, then months. The orange tree began to grow. Children from the village came every Saturday to the Saad Foundation, learning to sew, bake, read, write, and believe. Dupe became Auntie Dupe, the woman who taught without raising her voice, who smiled like someone carrying a secret only the wind understood. And every evening, she sat beneath the two trees, mango and orange, pain and hope. The graves beneath them no longer marked endings. They marked beginnings. And when the wind blew, she smiled, because she heard her mother's voice, still whispering, still guiding, still proud. Years passed. The mango tree grew taller, older, its bark thicker, its roots deeper. Beside it, the orange tree blossomed, bright, tender, alive. This fruit small at first, then firm, sweet, abundant. Children ran under their shade after Saturday classes. Girls practiced tying head wraps and boys recited proverbs about patience and pride. In the distance, women stirred pots, humming the same songs Kemi once sang while peeling yam. Time moved gently now, and in the middle of it all, Dupe remained, not as the bitter girl who once came searching for power, not as the liar who forged documents and raised her hand against the old woman who fed her, but as the woman who had been broken and rebuilt. The sod foundation expanded. One classroom became 3, a tailoring shed, a cooking hall, a library named after Mama Kemi, where girls could sit and read stories about other women who had fought and survived. Local government officials visited. Even the new Oba came. He bowed at the trees, planted one more beside them, a guava, in honor of peace. But Dupe didn't seek titles or praise. She remained in her mother's house, still swept the compound, still washed her wrapper by hand, still lit the kerosene lamp by 7 p.m. every evening, whispering, "Good night, Mommy," into the darkness. And every year on the anniversary of Kemi's passing, she would sit at the base of the mango tree and read the letter again. By then, the paper had browned. The ink was fading, but the words never lost their weight. Plant more trees, feed more mouths, teach more girls. One day, a young reporter from Lagos visited. She had heard whispers about the woman who turned a slap into a school. She brought cameras, microphones, journalists. She asked Dupe for her story. Dupe smiled gently and replied, "This is not my story. It is my mother's. She taught me that what you inherit doesn't always come through blood. Sometimes it comes through silence, through shame, through forgiveness, through staying." The reporter paused. "What would you say to the woman who raised you, if she were still alive?" Dupe looked up at the trees. Her eyes glistened, and she whispered, "I came to your house as a stranger. I leave it as your daughter." That night, the wind returned, gentle, familiar. It rustled the mango leaves, then danced through the orange branches. It curled around Dupe's window, then carried itself up into the dark sky, past rooftops, past stars, past time itself. And if you stood very still in that moment, if you closed your eyes, you would hear it. A voice, soft, proud. "Good girl,